Yes, Mr. Barnett, Mr. Humphrey, would you just acknowledge the oath and affirmation that you respectively made when you commenced your evidence? Thank you. Yes, now Mr. Elliott.
Just one issue here which won't take long, gentlemen. You'll appreciate that engineers obviously play an important role in the post-earthquake environment, and will hopefully continue to play that role in future in assessing buildings in the post-earthquake environment. And I just want to ask you a question or two around the advice that you gave the owner here. So your advice was, or one part of it was, the buildings do not pose an immediate risk to their occupants. And I take it that one of the considerations you're using in arriving at that advice was your assessment of the 11% NBS. Is that right?
That's correct.
Can I just ask for BUI COL 617-625.0010.28? And just for the graph to be enlarged, please. So is this an extract from your report dated 10 December 2010 to the owner?
Yes.
And you've attached this or included this response spectra?
Yes.
Does that relate to horizontal accelerations?
Yes, that one does.
So your own IEP calculation, which you've said is an approximation, resulted in an assessment of 11% NBS.
Yes.
And have you identified on this graph 15% of NBS in the green down the bottom left-hand corner?
Yes.
And you've nominated a period for this building of 0.4?
Yes.
And so the green line extends down there at 0.4 seconds. So at 15% of NBS, would that mean that the building would be capable of bearing horizontal accelerations of about 0.1 g?
Yes.
If the horizontal accelerations were greater than 0.1 g, would that mean the building could suffer damage and possible collapse depending upon how great they were?
Yes.
So in saying that the building did not pose an immediate risk, isn't there an underlying assumption that it wouldn't be exposed to horizontal accelerations greater than 0.1 g?
I think the assessment and the strengthening that was undertaken in '94 based it around the 0.1 g figure, which is what we've used there. It was clear though from September and from that graph that the accelerations exceeded that level on the 4th of September, and yet the damage, there was some damage, but it didn't suffer collapse. This assessment tool isn't an exact science. The building has borne out larger accelerations than 0.1 g. At what point it collapsed, I don't know.
So I'm not going to seek to direct criticism at you here, and I just want to look at the way that engineers might give this type of advice in this type of environment. Mr. Smith tells us that in February horizontal accelerations were 0.9 g, which is well and truly above code, and you've identified September 4, have you, at 80% of code, about 0.5 g, is that right?
That's about right, yeah.
So were you anticipating, if at all, if anything, that an aftershock could produce something less than 0.5 g?
Presumably, yes. We were assuming and operating under the assumption that the aftershocks would be less than the initial earthquake, and they would diminish.
But wouldn't that mean that aftershocks could still exceed 0.1 g, the building's capacity, even if they were less than 0.5 g?
Yes.
Is that sort of thing something engineers might take into account in carrying out similar assessments and giving advice in future?
It's possibly something we should look at.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Elliott. Mr. Lang. Commissioner Fennick. Commissioner Carter.
Nothing.
Mr. Barnett and Mr. Humphrey, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. (9:30 in the morning, Mr. Zarifa. So we're adjourned now till 9:30 tomorrow morning.
Commissioners will now retire. All stand, please.